There is a strange feeling moving through the world in the middle of the 2020s. On the surface, the news speaks about migration numbers, border disputes, refugee camps, and governments arguing about policy. Analysts talk about economic pressure, war, and demographic shifts. All of those explanations are real. Yet many people sense that something deeper is unfolding beneath those headlines. The year 2026 has become particularly striking. Migration statistics worldwide have reached levels that surprise even experienced researchers. Europe records some of the largest population movements in its modern history. North America struggles to manage unprecedented border crossings. Asia sees internal relocation on a scale that stretches administrative systems. Africa continues to experience the vast human movements that have long been part of its survival patterns. Economists usually explain migration through opportunity. People move toward work, stability, and safety. Conflict pushes them out of dangerous regions. Climate changes alter agricultural lands and water supplies. These are logical explanations. Yet when we step back and look at the pattern across history, the current moment begins to resemble something much older. Human civilization periodically enters phases where populations begin to move in waves. These are not simple migrations from one place to another. They are eras of displacement where entire cultural landscapes begin to shift. The ancient world experienced these moments many times. The slow collapse of the Roman world was preceded by centuries of tribal movements across Europe. The medieval era saw migrations that reshaped the map of continents. Even the early modern age experienced waves of settlement and displacement as empires expanded and then fractured. To the people living inside those moments, everything felt uncertain. Cities filled with unfamiliar languages. Traditions collided. Political authorities struggled to keep control over societies that suddenly felt unstable. Historians later described these periods as great migrations. But to those living through them, they felt more like the quiet unraveling of a familiar world. For much of the modern era, people believed that humanity had finally solved this problem. The creation of the nation-state brought clearly defined borders. Passports, immigration laws, and international treaties were designed to regulate movement across those borders. For over a century, this system appeared stable. Nations developed strong identities tied to territory and citizenship. Governments assumed that borders could be managed through policy and enforcement. But something unusual began happening during the past decade. The system is not collapsing overnight, but it is slowly softening around the edges. Borders still exist on maps, yet in practice they are becoming difficult to control. New migration routes appear across deserts and oceans. Temporary camps emerge outside major cities. Governments introduce emergency policies that struggle to keep pace with events. Some leaders promise stronger enforcement. Others argue for open systems of movement. Yet the deeper trend continues regardless of political arguments. Because of this, some observers are searching for explanations outside traditional political analysis. Ancient traditions contain a curious warning about removing what they called the ancient landmarks. In the biblical world, these landmarks were boundary stones marking fields and territories. But they also symbolized stability between communities and nations. To remove those stones meant dissolving the order that allowed societies to function across generations. For centuries, theologians debated whether these passages referred only to property disputes or whether they hinted at larger moments in history when the boundaries between peoples would begin to blur. When viewed through that lens, the present era begins to feel strangely familiar. Across the world, cultural lines are shifting. Nations debate the meaning of citizenship. Cities transform within a single generation as new populations arrive. For many people, this creates a sense of unease. Yet others suggest that these events may be part of an older cycle in which civilizations periodically break apart and rebuild themselves. Long before migration statistics existed, certain visionaries described scenes that sound surprisingly similar to the world we see today. Among the most intriguing was the South African seer Sina van Rensburg. Living during the turmoil of the Boer War, he became known for visions that many followers believed described distant future events. One of the images associated with his vision speaks of great mud-colored clouds slowly moving across continents. Some interpreted these clouds as masses of people drifting across nations. The image is strangely powerful. Not armies. Not storms. But human clouds slowly crossing borders and landscapes. The image of moving clouds becomes even more intriguing when compared with the writings of the French Renaissance figure Nostradamus. His famous quatrains are cryptic and open to interpretation, yet several passages have been linked by later readers to large demographic changes in Europe. Whether those interpretations are accurate is still debated. Nostradamus wrote in symbolic language that allows many readings. But the idea that populations would shift dramatically across the continent appears repeatedly in various prophetic traditions. Lesser-known visionaries from Eastern Europe and the Middle East also described similar scenes. Their writings often speak about masses of people moving slowly across lands, almost like geological forces. That comparison may sound dramatic, yet the images appearing in modern media sometimes resemble exactly that. Long lines of migrants crossing dusty roads. Overcrowded boats drifting across seas. Temporary cities of tents rising near national borders. Human migration has always existed, so it would be easy to dismiss these parallels as coincidence. Yet ancient texts often connect mass displacement with moments when societies are about to experience profound transformation. The biblical narrative contains many stories of exile. Entire populations are described as being uprooted and scattered among other nations. At first glance, exile appears purely tragic. But within the narrative it often serves another purpose. When people are forced out of familiar structures, they begin to question the institutions that once shaped their lives. Systems that appeared permanent suddenly reveal their weaknesses. Ancient prophets described these moments as a shaking of nations. The phrase suggests a time when political and social structures are tested. When large groups of migrants enter established societies, they place pressure on systems that were designed for stability rather than rapid change. Housing networks strain. Labor markets shift. Political debates intensify. Through that process, the true strength of institutions becomes visible. In modern times, we are beginning to witness something very similar. Countries that once seemed politically stable now face intense arguments about borders, identity, and cultural integration. Political parties rise and fall based on how they respond to migration. Alliances between nations become strained as different governments adopt different policies. Even international organizations designed to coordinate global cooperation are beginning to struggle. History shows that population movements have often accelerated the decline of powerful empires. When large groups of migrants entered the territories of the Roman world, its administrative systems gradually weakened. The empire found itself trying to absorb new populations while maintaining order across vast distances. Other civilizations experienced similar pressures. Today, the global economy adds another layer of complexity. Migration influences supply chains, labor markets, and political alliances simultaneously. When cultures that developed separately over centuries suddenly share the same social space, friction can occur. Some societies adapt gradually. Others experience sharp polarization. Across the modern world, this tension is becoming increasingly visible. The institutions designed to regulate international cooperation are finding it harder to maintain control. Treaties still exist. Agreements are still signed. But enforcement often falls behind the speed of events. New migration routes appear faster than governments can regulate them. Technology plays a role in this transformation. Information now travels instantly. Migrants share routes and strategies through digital networks. This creates an unusual paradox. Governments possess more surveillance tools than ever before, yet controlling global human movement has become increasingly difficult. Some thinkers believe this signals the fading of an era dominated by centralized political control. Ancient prophetic traditions occasionally describe moments when large human power structures begin to weaken. These moments are rarely sudden collapses. Instead, they resemble long processes in which old systems slowly lose their ability to function. Mass migration may act as a kind of grinding stone within that process. Not a single disaster, but a persistent force that gradually wears down the structures of the old world. If this interpretation is correct, the world may be entering a long transition rather than a short crisis. Systems built for stable populations begin to struggle when demographics change rapidly. Economic models assume predictable labor markets. Political systems assume stable national identities. When those assumptions break down, the foundations of the system begin to shift. This does not necessarily mean sudden collapse. More often it means a slow dismantling of structures that once seemed permanent. During such transitions there is always suffering. Displacement is rarely easy. Families leave familiar lands, languages, and traditions behind. Communities receiving migrants must adapt quickly to rapid cultural change. Economic uncertainty spreads as industries adjust to new realities. For those living through these moments, the experience can feel deeply unsettling. Yet many ancient traditions describe upheaval as a necessary stage before renewal. Biblical writings frequently speak about something called a remnant. The remnant represents people who endure through times of upheaval and help rebuild societies afterward. These groups are not always defined by ethnicity or nationality. More often they are defined by resilience, adaptability, and a willingness to form new communities. History offers many examples. After the collapse of large empires, smaller regional societies often emerge and experiment with new systems of governance. In medieval Europe, the fall of centralized Roman authority eventually gave rise to networks of local communities that developed their own cultures and institutions. Over time, these local systems formed the foundations of the modern world. If the current global order is undergoing a similar transformation, the future may involve a rebalancing between large centralized powers and smaller community networks. Technology may make such a shift easier than in previous centuries. Local communities can remain connected to global information and trade while maintaining cultural autonomy. Already there are signs of this trend. Regional identities are strengthening even as global communication expands. Some communities are experimenting with localized agriculture, decentralized energy, and cooperative governance. Within that context, the massive movements of people occurring today may eventually contribute to entirely new cultural landscapes. Cities could become meeting points where traditions blend into unexpected combinations. Rural regions might attract groups seeking stability away from large political centers. None of this will unfold smoothly. Transitions between historical eras rarely do. They involve confusion, experimentation, and conflict before new systems stabilize. For individuals living through such times, the challenge is learning how to navigate uncertainty while preserving meaningful values. Moments of upheaval often reveal the true character of societies. When systems function smoothly, people assume stability will last forever. When those systems begin to shake, deeper questions emerge. What does belonging mean in a world where movement is constant? How can cultures preserve identity while adapting to new influences? Can political systems evolve fast enough to match the realities of a mobile global population? These questions remain unanswered. Yet history shows that humanity has faced similar turning points before. Each time the process felt chaotic and frightening to those experiencing it. And yet each time new forms of civilization eventually emerged from the turbulence. Perhaps the unsettling feeling spreading across the world today is simply the recognition that we are living inside one of those turning points. A moment when the old landmarks shift, when populations move like clouds across continents, and when the world pauses between the structures of the past and the possibilities of the future. Thank you for watching. Please join the conversation and leave a comment. The ideas explored here draw from interpretations of biblical prophetic literature, historical migration studies, recorded traditions connected to Sina van Rensburg, writings attributed to Nostradamus, and broader historical analysis of how demographic movements reshape civilizations. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. It helps us to beat the algorithm.